Peace, peace, peace. I am Phillip Roundtree, and you are tuned into the April 26th edition of Rhetorically Speaking. Props to those of you who are tuned in on, what's this, Instagram Live that's in front of my face. Props to y'all. Definitely head on over to YouTube and join the cool kids, because we all want to be a cool kid, right? Definitely appreciate the people who are watching on YouTube. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and the share button, because supposedly that does something with the algorithm, something I still haven't mastered. I think I'm gonna pay somebody like $99.99 to teach me how the algorithms give it up. You know what I mean? So we get this viewership up. And last but certainly not least, shouts to those of you who are tuned in on Facebook Live. So listen, I wasn't here last week. I know a lot of ish popped off, right? And that's what we're gonna be talking about tonight. Informally, I gave my thoughts on the Derek Chauvin guilty verdict, but I'm gonna expound a little bit more here on Rhetorically Speaking. And as you see what it says, more police impunity and denial. They still killing niggas out here, right? So for those of you, including George Floyd's brother, now I got to show him some grace, right? Because, he might feel like the verdict was justice with regards to his brother and his family. I don't know. I can't speak for him, but I'm still going to show him some grace. But we recognize no justice was shown. As I've been saying since they've been killing Negroes, and I've been aware of it, is no such thing as justice. It can only be accountability. And I'm even starting to question that now. Is that truly accountability? So we're going to walk through that, right? Because we know that they've killed and killed again. And when I say they, we talking about white folk, we talking about the man, we talking about the police. Listen, I'm not necessarily a fan. Shout out to Sharif tuned in. Listen, I took off last week just because I was exhausted. Plus, school has been kicking my behind. Shout out to Leash. I saw her on there. She's the only other black person in my cohort. And trust me, listen, if I could start my whole college career over, I'm going to go on a little tangent a little bit. I would have went to a HBCU knowing what I know now, a place where I can feel more supported, even if it's just an illusion of more support. The idea of community and being around other black folk, I haven't had that experience at any point in my college career, and I always feel what I'm missing during times of crisis for black folk, when it's only the other black folk who truly reach out and see what's going on, checking in, seeing how we're feeling. And so that's why I use that term ally on probation, like I always do, right? Because you not checking in about how I feel about Anthony Brown Jr. from being back on another side. Now, I'm not going to say that, but no, it's just the idea of experiencing, having a communal experience, and the importance of that. Listen, I know some cool white folk. Shouts to them. I always name them, right? That show how many white friends. I actually added a white friend. I don't even know if I should call him a friend or not, but he seemed like a cool white guy. Shout out to Steve, who tunes in from time to time. A professor at Kutztown University, where I attend. But I always got to shout out my other two favorite white folk, which who are Mike and Jamie. So props to them. But yeah, I wish I would have went to an HBCU, no doubt. So listen, we're gonna get right into this conversation about the verdict of the bull who killed George Floyd, Derek Chauvin. And he was found guilty on all charges. For many black folk, I'm not going to say we were shocked, but we were shocked. Like we were expecting the unexpected, right? And I'm sure for a majority, for a percentage of us, we were definitely shocked by the verdict. A part of me wished that. Matter of fact, let me stay on topic. So I ain't talk to y'all in a minute. So I'm about my mind going a mile a minute. That's why I had to smoke my little ganja, right, to help me center. So the verdict came down. He was found guilty on all charges, specifically the second-degree murder charge, which carries a minimum penalty, I believe, of 12 and a half years. Seeing as though he's a first-time offender, right? He doesn't have a record. Concern lies that he might get that, I believe it's somewhere between 10 and 12 years. He'll get that 12 years. He'll be back living his life. Meanwhile, George Floyd, hence the reason why this is injustice, is because we won't see him no more. Right? His family, his daughter, his friends won't be able to hug and kiss him and laugh at his jokes. And so that's why I encourage just black folk or supporters, allies on probation, to pump the brakes a little bit, right? Because we still have 2 more months until he's sentenced. We saw with that white lady, what's her name, Amber Geiger, who killed the now ancestor Botham Jean in his own apartment. Emphasis on his apartment. We see that she got a little slap on the wrist, right? And so even still, even if he does get those 12 years, that doesn't heal a community. Because why? An hour right before, Ma'Khia Bryant is killed by Ohio police. And so this is one of the reasons why I say I wonder if a not guilty verdict for Chauvin would have been better off for what it is that black folk are clamming for, and rightfully so, but what America needs. And the reason why I say that is because a guilty verdict represents, okay, slap on the wrist. Everybody cheering. Again, feel like it's symbolic. You feel like you won something. Meanwhile, his trial did nothing to stop this cop from killing Ma'Khia Bryant. Now, I'm not going to speak to the particulars of that, right? To that case, because it does me no good in attempting to justify the murder of a 16-year-old black person, and particularly a black girl. Does me no good. Right? I've seen a lot of people making quite compelling arguments on both sides. But for me and what it is that I do, I recognize that me talking about what took place and whether that was a good shoot or not, that doesn't serve me in any way. The only thing that's going to be left is people flustered with me, and me feeling like I've expressed this point, which again does nothing for what the overarching goal is black liberation. But people did make some compelling arguments. I will say that. And so if you notice me liking some of your stats, you'll be able to you'll know that I was digging it. And so the reason, again, getting back to just that point of the not guilty piece, right? We know that change if we look historically and we look at this idea of change, systemic change in particular, we're talking about overthrowing governments, getting folk up out the paint. We know that it didn't come from the little crumbs that these agencies, that these governments, that these societies were handing out. No, it came from overt acts of injustice. And the biggest injustice would have been a not guilty verdict. You know, I was talking with Dr. Shan on Instagram Live, and she brought up this point, and I just heard somebody else talk about it. I believe it was Dr. Umar. Yes, that Dr. Umar, donations. And it brought up the point where they might have been forced to offer a guilty verdict because of everything that was at stake. We saw what took place last summer. based off the murder. Could you only imagine what the response would be from a not guilty verdict? And at first, I poo-pooed it, right? I'm like, nah, because they're still white, and they'll still have the opportunity to hide behind whiteness. But then I thought about it a little bit, and we talk about the impact of peers on society, right? Our peers on society. When I say peers, I'm talking, in the bigger idea of peers just being human beings living in the same quarters, in the same space. And how we recognize that behavioral changes occur based off the people that you're around, or that you can be influenced both positively and negatively, or healthy and unhealthy in the terms that I like to use. And so now I'm in agreement, right? I do think that we're proper jurors on there. We know that it was the jury pool consisted of majority white folk, and if forgive my terminology, mixed race individuals. I just don't feel like trying to pull out those words, and a couple black folk. And with that being said, they recognized how the city was torn up, the economic fallout that came from the George Floyd verdict, not the George Floyd verdict, but from the government recognizing that, hey, we played a part in this, so here we're going to give you $20 million. Now it may be conscious or unconscious, right, that they are doing this, but I can't neglect the fact that that the peer influence. You got the whole world looking at you, not just America, not just Minneapolis. Protests were held in various countries as a result of this. That's a lot of pressure, right? That's a lot of pressure. And so yeah, I am in. I can agree with that point that I think that did have some type of influence. Now, will it have some type of influence in the killing of Ma'Khia Bryant? I doubt it. Right? I doubt it. And I'm not saying whether I agreed with the shooting or, and that sounds even nasty to say. Right? I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna say whether I agreed or didn't agree. But what I can say is I feel confident that police officer is not going to be charged. Right? Because there's enough aggravating circumstances that existed in that moment to potentially justify it. Right? And so I hope we're bracing ourselves. I hope we're bracing ourselves for the fallout of this. And you still can't, when you're seeing black bodies fall all over the place, it's kind of impossible. It's difficult to brace yourself for it. Hence the reason why I always say don't engage with it. You shouldn't have watched that video if it's going to trigger you to where you're getting on social media talking about how you're so angry, you're so pissed off, you're so frustrated, and all of the emotions related to it. I use the analogy of like turning on the water and then putting your hand under the water and what were you expecting, not to get wet? Everything, there's consequences to everything. But again, a part of me knows to show that grace to people. And then we're also conditioned to watch these things. It's like the car crash, right? Everybody slows up. Especially now that we have the ability to, everybody has the ability to spout their opinion. But watching this does no good. Right? Watching this would have done me no good. Use I statements, right? Hence the reason why I didn't watch it. And hence the reason why, if and when this video of Anthony Brown Jr. ever sees the light of day, I won't be watching that either. Now, I just became aware of Anthony Brown Jr., who was murdered, apparently, by police in Elizabeth City, North Carolina, a day after the Derek Chauvin verdict. Again, killing black folk with impunity, right? And I know we're supposed to have the George Floyd Act and policing that's supposed to trickle down. We know some of the things that's emphasized in the bill include banning chokeholds. A big sticking point is this idea of qualified immunity. And forcing states from a federal level to make some changes, as well as being able to sue individual officers and not police. The idea of you should have. So the George Floyd Act says, as currently constructed, that they want individuals to be able to sue individual police officers. Right? That's a part of it. However, pushback is coming from the other side, stating that no, they should only be able to sue police departments, not individuals. And also one of the things in it is a database for bad cops. And so the goal was to have this by the end of May, which is the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd's murder. However, where they are with the sticking points, who knows if this will happen. And so again, we keep trotting out this idea of reform. Reform. When we again recognize that the entire system of policing here in America is corroded. And so this does little to change anything. We saw the trial. That wasn't a deterrent for Anthony Brown Jr. to be shot with both hands on a steering wheel, posing no kind of threat. Allegedly shot by 5 police officers or more. Apparently there's 10 out on some type of administrative leave. Because of course they're not identifying them, right? But some of those individuals have resigned or retired. And again, I've just learned about this today. So apparently they were serving a drug warrant. Again, that war on drugs. Right? He doesn't strike me as El Chapo. They didn't send 10 people after El Chapo when they finally caught him. Right? And so in serving it, he ended up getting murdered. I was watching on I'm not going to even say the station's name, based off Rick Santorum and what he said about Native Americans, right? But as I was watching that channel, I saw Bakari Sellers, I saw Ben Crump, and I saw another sister with Anthony Brown's family. And I said, oh, this is about to get real. And so I'm listening to the press conference, and they were supposed to watch the video, right? But apparently the video was redacted down to 22 seconds, and all it showed was the murder. And even then, his hands were on the steering wheel as he was being shot up. Again, this is in the aftermath of the Derek Chauvin verdict. And so, people saying what could be learned from this trial, from this verdict? And they're shocked when I say absolutely nothing. Because cops will still act with impunity. There will still be a denial of accountability. Now we know North Carolina is the South, and they've gone out of their way to not allow this family to see what happened to their loved one. Again, and I can't overemphasize enough. A week. It's been a week since the Derek Chauvin trial ended. Sharif says Sellers never says anything real. I'm not necessarily concerned with about what Bakari Sellers says outside of that press conference. Right? It's sort of like Umar Johnson, where people say, people have their gripes with him. I make fun of him any chance I get. But that's not to say that he doesn't have critical conversations and make salient points. And I asked the question, is that the duality? Right? To be on polar opposite ends. And so I'm able to see when Umar's having conversations about black mental health for black boys in particular in the school to prison pipeline. And he's talking about how the medication for ADHD is in the same class as cocaine. And you're locking up the fathers for cocaine, but giving a schedule, I believe a Schedule 2 drug. It might be a Schedule 1. Schedule 2 drug like Ritalin to their sons. So yeah, when he's talking about his teachers at his FGDM school, FDGM, FDMG, Frederick Douglass Marcus Garvey School. Yeah, I'm cool on that. But when he's making salient points about issues that are critical to Black America, I'm tuned in. No different than Bakari Sellers, right? And so he enlightened me on what was taking place in this situation with Anthony Brown Jr. I think it's important that we don't just, and that's why I'm not a fan of cancel culture. I don't believe it's a thing anyway, especially for black folk, because black folk aren't necessarily in a position where we can cancel folk. Or we can discard folks. Because they may be hollow at some points. I read his memoir. It was fluff. However, in this instance, I'm going to celebrate the brother for being up there and being able to articulate what's taking place in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. In particular with the Anthony Brown Jr. family. Yo, when I don't do these, my wind be awful. I got to get back to doing this regular. You know what I mean? And hopefully, so with school being over relatively soon, I'll be able to have more conversations with some more dope people. And so this was just an introductory for the week to get my feet wet. Listen, I appreciate you all for tuning in. Until next time.